Thank you all. Thank you, Julian. As I look around here, Julian and Terry are two examples of a lot of you who I've known for 42 years. So it is a pleasure to be here. I feel like I normally would put on a sport coat or something for these kinds of things, but as you're going to see in just a moment, we have a lot of construction going on at the zoo. And Tuesdays and Thursday mornings are our construction meetings. So I've been tromping around in mud and dust. No mud, unfortunately, but a lot of dust this morning, so I changed clothes real fast to get here. Thank you for having me. We do have a lot going on at the zoo, and what I hope to do here in the next few minutes is update you on that, and then I will be more than happy to answer any questions you have. I got to tell you, I have been doing public speaking for 42 years, and this is the first time I've ever had the pleasure of looking at a screen and a clock. This is wonderful. It's Billy, right? Billy needs to go with me wherever I go. What I'm going to do here now is share with you some incredible things that are going on at the zoo. I will start out by saying that the zoo, as most of you in here know, opened in 1974. I happened to be there that morning, believe it or not. And while that was the official opening of the zoo, the real, to me, beginning of the zoo was 6 years later in 1980. Some of you may remember that the zoo did not always enjoy the great relationship that it did with the community, and especially the local politicians. So from 1974 to 1980, and here comes one of my few puns, the zoo was a real white elephant in Columbia. We were able to solve that in 1980, and beginning then and through now, we really have not looked back. I mentioned 1980 for two reasons. One, that we were able to get our financial house in order, but also that started a sort of a rough ticking clock that about every 7 to 8 years since then, the zoo has undergone some sort of expansion program. The first one resulted in the aquarium reptile complex. Some of you may remember that. The second one, we built a botanical garden. The third one resulted in the new elephant and gorilla exhibit and the entrance to the botanical garden. And here we are now on our most recent expansion, which is by a factor of 100% bigger than any one we've ever done. And it's going to really change the face of Riverbanks Zoo and Garden for a long, long time. All of those other expansion efforts really were geared to what we call, marketing now, product. Product meaning animal exhibits or attractions. This one is a little different, and I'll explain that to you, in that about half of the money we're spending, and it's approximately $40 million, so about 20 million of those dollars are really geared to infrastructure and allowing us to handle the 1 million people who come to the zoo every year. I'm going to start out, however, with just a couple of bragging points just to sort of benchmark us. Riverbanks is consistently named as one of the top 10 zoos in the United States, and I really should have an asterisk by that because there is no ranking like football teams. But there are independent surveys that come out all the time. TripAdvisor is a big one, and some others, and we've been very fortunate to be mentioned frequently as one of the best zoos in the country. We just finished our 14-15 fiscal year on June 30th, and for the 6th straight year, we attracted 1 million visitors. In fact, this year was the 3rd biggest year in the zoo's history, which is quite an accomplishment when you consider that about a third of it was torn up, and we never thought we would hit it, but we did. About 200,000 of our 1 million visitors are school children from throughout South Carolina, North Carolina, and Georgia. We follow school calendars, as you might imagine, at the zoo, and the ones, common sense will tell you that the school calendars that we follow closest are those here in Richmond, Lexington counties. The school calendars that we follow after that are the Charlotte schools and the Augusta schools. They send more people to the zoo, more children than any other area in South Carolina other than Richmond, Lexington County. And 70,000 of those children get some sort of formal program while they're at the zoo. We are the largest attraction in the state of South Carolina. There we are on the right. This data, by the way, is a year old. Showing the State Museum on the left at 143. I know their numbers are much bigger than that now with their great expansion program, but this will show you how Riverbanks stacks up to some of our other well-known attractions around the state. But even bigger or better is that we are now the largest zoo in the southeastern United States in terms of attendance. There's not a zoo that you can go to almost east of the Mississippi. There are only a handful that draw more visitors than we do. So there's Miami, Atlanta, Jacksonville, Dallas, and Memphis. I don't think Dallas is in the southeast, but it's a big city. So we have this unusual situation within our profession, and the zoo profession is a relatively small profession. There are more people sitting in this room than there are directors of major zoos in the United States. So it's a very small group of people, and we are constantly benchmarking ourselves against our peers. Nobody uses our data. No other zoo, they immediately, when they're doing benchmarking, they scratch Riverbanks Zoo off because our attendance is so high compared to the metropolitan population, it throws off all their studies. So it's kind of an interesting arena to be in. How many in here belong to the Riverbanks Society? That's a very typical reaction. We now have just under 35,000 household memberships. People who pay annual dues to belong to the zoo and garden, they get free admission, and they are pumping through that membership alone $2.5 million into the zoo every year. This is what our budget looks like. I won't spend a lot of time on it, but we are proud of that pie chart on the left. That dark blue is our level of self-sufficiency. We have a $12 million budget and we're 71% self-sufficient. And in the fiscal year that we just entered, we're predicting to up that by 2-3 more percent. So the zoo is edging ever closely to being less reliant on public funding. The pie chart on the right over here is our budget, how we spend our money. This morning I was looking at a very similar chart from the Lincoln Park Zoo in Chicago, and it looked almost exactly like that. So if you went to any major zoo in the country and looked at how their money is spent, you'll see that the biggest chunk will be in animal care and then facilities. Zoos are extremely expensive to maintain. The zoo is also a powerful economic driver. I always have to say I am not a big fan of economic impact studies. No two organizations ever use the same criteria to come up with a number. More often than not, you see highly inflated numbers, but we were asked a couple of years ago by Richland County Council, asked in terms of having a gun to my head, you will do an economic impact study. And we identified a gentleman, kind of an interesting guy. He's at the University of South Carolina, and he's one of those people where you say you've got people in your backyard you don't know about. This gentleman is a world's authority on tourism and economic impact. And he's never done an economic impact study for any organization in South Carolina. To show you what his credentials are like, he did this study for us 2 years ago, and his two previous clients to us were the country of France and the state of Texas. So this guy knows what he's doing, and he uses a very simple rather than complicated methodology to come up with an impact. His number is usually low, which to me means it's probably fairly accurate. When I say low, compared to where you'll read some museum has a huge impact, and you question that, but he pegged our impact at about $60 million a year on the Richland and Lexington County economy, and that's based on that first number up there, which is pretty amazing when you think about it. 400,000 people a year come to Riverbanks Zoo from outside of Richland and Lexington County. 95% of those 400,000 people, when surveyed, say they were only in Columbia, South Carolina that day to visit the zoo. They weren't here visiting a relative, they weren't here on business, they weren't driving through Columbia on the way to Disney World and happened to find out we had a zoo. They made a conscious effort that morning, be they from Orangeburg or Fayetteville, North Carolina, or wherever, to come to Columbia to go to the zoo. And those folks are spending money while they're here, and that's sort of a segue into what we're doing now. Back up for 1 second. You'll see this in a minute. We have dubbed this expansion effort Destination Riverbanks. That's sort of been our little marketing tag. The reason we're using that word is that we are trying to edge Riverbanks closer and closer to being a destination attraction. If you go to a dictionary or go to Google and look up destination attraction, you may or may not find the definition, and the definition is all different, but basically what it means is an institution or an organization like a zoo or a theme park where people spend so much time that at the end of that visit, they are prompted either, if they're from out of town, out of state, they are prompted to have a meal in a local restaurant or stay in a hotel and have meals. Our length of stay right now is right at 4 hours. Average length of stay, most people consider around 5 hours, getting you into that destination territory. There are no destination attractions in South Carolina, although we do have 3 very well-known destination cities, Myrtle Beach, Charleston, Hilton Head. There's not a single attraction within the state that keeps people as long as we do. And we're hoping with what we're doing now to keep them even longer. We have a new partnership with the zoo. I threw this slide in a few days ago because it really means a lot to us. You may be surprised to know that people spent last year $5.6 million on food and retail while at the zoo. We do not run that ourselves. I woke up one morning about 20 years ago thinking about how much soy was in our hamburger, and I said, why am I doing that? I'm a zoo director, not a restaurateur. We privatized our food and retail operations. We were with Aramark for a long time, and we have a new partnership now. It's 2 years old with a company out of Denver called Service Systems Associates. All they do are zoos and aquariums, and they are great partners. Not only is a nice chunk of that $5.6 million coming back to the zoo's operating budget, they have also, in the 2 years that they've been here, spent $3 million improving our food and retail facilities. So you can't see this really well, but on the right is the old Kidney Cafe, which is now called Tusker's. If you haven't been there, you should. It has no physical resemblance to the old restaurant. The food in there is excellent. I probably went 2 years and never ate in our old restaurant. I ate there 3 days a week, so it will show you how good the food is. And then on the left, we have a new snack stand called Solo's Market that is a kind of architectural marvel. So if you're ever at the zoo, pay attention to some of the things we've done. So here we are at Destination Riverbanks, and I'm going to take just a minute to explain, because I throw out all kind of numbers, and if you do the math in your head, they don't add up, and that's welcome to the world of government funding and private fundraising. But we were very fortunate 18 months ago to get Richland and Lexington County Councils to each unanimously approve a $32 million bond issue for zoo and garden improvements. We are also included at the tune of $4 million in the Richland County Transportation Penny Fund, which I will tell you about in a minute. So 32 and 4 makes 36, and we're now raising the other 4. So we're doing really well. So at the end of the day, when the dust settles, you'll see $40 million worth of improvements. We're trying to tick off a few boxes here. The first 3 have to do with accommodating our guests. Sea lion, grizzly, otter are the 3 new animal exhibits. Our children's garden, which is a real sleeper project, that's where I was this morning for about an hour and a half, is going to set the city on its ear. Trust me when you see it. There's nothing like it anywhere around here. It's really pretty incredible. So let's talk for a minute about, oh, I got a clock. Let's talk for a minute about these million people. How many of you remember when the economy went crazy on us in 2008 and 2009? If you were looking at CNN or any news show or whatever, you heard our economists were talking about staycation. You remember that term? The fact that when people's funds were stretched, rather than going to Disney World or maybe even Myrtle Beach transfer a week, they stay closer to home. Well, that actually happened to us. In the roughly 10 years leading up to 2008, we averaged 850,000 people a year. And now we've averaged 1 million in the last 6 years. So we picked up an extra 150,000 visitors. And interestingly, we haven't lost them. And the only real explanation for that is that we got a lot of people come back to the zoo who had not been in a number of years and realized how much the zoo had grown and how much it had changed, and they've stuck with us. So that's the good news. The bad news is that when we were averaging those 850,000 people a year, we didn't know that we had maxed out our parking and access. When that 550,000, one person, whatever that number is, came, we had a problem. And if you've ever driven up and down I-126 during spring break, during Lights Before Christmas, during Boo at the Zoo, and you've seen us back the interstate up a half a mile or more in both directions, you know what I'm talking about. If you stood in line for 45 minutes to get in the zoo, you know what I'm talking about. So we began almost immediately to look at how we could solve that. And one of the things, the first thing we did, and this pointer's kind of dying on me to light, but if you've ever driven up and down I-126 and seen these buildings out here, we now own all those. We bought them all. And I will tell you that that one, and almost all of that one are now gone. We demolished those, and I'll get to that in a minute. But our biggest challenge has been from 1974, this one way in and one way out, the crossing over the CSX railroad line. And I will tell you right now, a lot of people have never seen an aerial photograph of the zoo, and you can see what keeps me up at night. We are 100% landlocked. In fact, our site, let's see if I can get another 10 seconds out of this thing. Our site is a triangle. Two sides of the triangle are the lower Saluda River. The third side of the triangle, you can name your poison. It's either the SC&G transmission lines, the CSX Railroad, or I-26. So I will tell you here in the last week of July in 2015, that's as big physically as Riverbanks will ever be, unless we cross the river. We love trees, but that's not why all these trees are down here. Those trees are along there because they're in the floodplain. So what you see is what you get. I mentioned early on all these expansion programs we've done over the years. This one is no different. We are not adding 1 inch to the sidewalk system. Everything is being built within the existing zoo infrastructure. So we have a very challenging site. You would never, if you were a private investor and somebody came to you and said, I want you to invest $10 million. We're going to build a tourist attraction to draw 1 million people a year on that piece of property. And oh, and by the way, you got to cross a railroad and there's only one way in and one way out. You would run. So it has been, again, a good news, bad news, Joe. The good news is it's a beautiful site. We're located within a mile of downtown, 3 interstate highways, all those things. The bad news is it really is not a good site for growth. So we are really being challenged by all of these things. And again, going back, we're trying to solve all of that. So the first thing we did after buying these buildings, and that took about 3 years to accomplish, we tore down the 3 on the left, and just a month ago opened up a new 536-car parking lot across the railroad tracks from the zoo. The key word there is across the railroad tracks. So if you were to come to the zoo Saturday, I can guarantee you if the weather is in the low 90s like they're saying, we'll have 7,000 or 8,000 people minimum, and that means you're going to be parking over there. And depending on the time of the day. And if you do park over there, you're going to have to walk across a very active railroad track. So after buying those buildings or beginning that process, we began working with CSX. Took 3 years of my life, basically, if you've ever worked the railroad. We're actually very cooperative, very understanding, but they have a very rigid process for permitting crossing. So that we finally now have a permit to build a pedestrian bridge across the railroad track that will link that new 536 car parking lot to the entry plaza that we just opened on July 3rd. This is an early artist rendering, but it's fairly accurate. The bridge not only has ramps, there are elevators, so we think it's not ideal. In fact, we first approached the railroad with going under the railroad, and when they stopped laughing, then we started looking at a bridge over the railroad. But I think it's going to be a great amenity, and certainly will make visits to the zoo much safer. This is ready to go. The blueprints are there. All I need is for Richland County Council to approve it. Enough said. This is the entry to the zoo. I'm going to show you a couple of, let's see, 6-year-old drawings. This was how we hoped the new entrance would work out. The parking lot would be at the top of this. New gift shop, new ticketing. And this was a rendering done by Junker Carter Cease Architects here. This drawing was done in 2009. So this is a 6-year-old drawing of what we hope one day to build, and it's finished. It's open. We opened it on July the 3rd very quietly. We closed down the temporary ticket booth, temporary entrance at 5 o'clock on the afternoon of July the 2nd, and at 9 o'clock the next morning, this one opened up. And it has functioned amazingly well. These photographs really don't do it justice. This is the new ticketing building, new gift shop. The best thing we have here is behind this glass over here on the left. The zoo has never had a central point, shame on us, to accommodate the needs and wishes of our 1 million guests. So for example, if you lost a cell phone, if you lost a 4-year-old, if you needed first aid, we had that scattered throughout the zoo. It is now housed in one building, and we have we basically have now a concierge desk. It's a beautiful space. People can come in and get any of their needs taken care of. That building also houses a 2-bed first aid facility. Most people never stop to think, but stop. 1 million people a year, somebody's going to need first aid. We actually average about 50 ambulance calls a year, which surprises a lot of people, and over 60% of those are folks with pre-existing conditions. And I've told this story 1 million times and people laugh, but I can assure you it is 100% true. I cannot tell you how many times a year I will hear over the radio in my office that someone has fainted or passed out, say, in the birdhouse. And you go down there and there's this elderly person laying flat out on the floor, several family members around, we're doing first aid, and you walk up and you quietly ask, what happened, did she fall? No, she had heart bypass surgery on Tuesday, and it's such a nice day, we thought she'd love to come to the zoo and walk around. That happens every week. So we have a great new first aid facility out there we're very proud of. We also have something in that building that has been the #1 most requested amenity for over 10 years, and that is a room for nursing mothers. So we have a lactation room, and thanks to Palmetto Richland's lactation nurses came out and gave us some good advice on outfitting that room. Over here on the right is the new gift shop. Has anybody in here been in this facility? It is amazing. It looks like an upscale department store. It is not your grandfather's zoo gift shop, trust me. They have everything in the world in there, and it looks very, very nice. Then at the bottom are our 2 new animal exhibits, grizzly on the left, otter on the right. You probably can't see this, but if you look at this picture, there are the 3 little otters looking at the grizzly the first time they saw each other. And one of the keepers took that photograph on her cell phone, and it's just so great I had to leave that in there. It's really, really turned out well. Our sea lion exhibit is a little bit ahead of construction schedule. They'll probably turn it over to us sometime in late January. Unlike otter and grizzly, when they turned it over to us, we literally had animals in there 3 days later. This will take us probably 6 weeks to 2 months due to the nature of the life support systems and the fact the animals are coming from California. So this one's going to take a little bit of time. What you should see here is not what you can see, but is what we call the life support building. It is 2 stories tall and is the most amazing. It looks like a nuclear submarine on the inside, which is part of the reason why we demolished the old sea lion exhibit. It just had far outlived its usefulness, and we were not able to provide those animals with the quality of life that they deserve. Now, we're doing something unique, and this kind of harkens back to my comments about not adding any sidewalk space. We didn't have this grand vista to do this sort of small recreation of the California coastline, so we thought we'd take a little urban approach, so we were copying Pier 39 in San Francisco. So that's what this is going to look like, and there it is. So we back up here 1 second. You see that big piece of curved wall, or curved glass, I should say. There's where it goes. There's only one company in the United States that makes this. Not this exhibit, but makes that acrylic window. So no matter how far ahead or how far behind our contractor is, until that one company delivers that product, that's the schedule that we'll be on. This thing is going to have underwater viewing, at-level viewing, and above-level viewing. There's nothing like it in the United States, I can assure you. This is a similar exhibit at Salt Lake City, and our architect, CLR Design of Philadelphia, designed this one. So this will give you a little bit of a feel for what the interior spaces will look like with the underwater view. And then I mentioned earlier our sleeper project. This is over in the Botanical Garden. It's a 3-acre site, 3 acres. If you've been over to the garden, hopefully you've been, or you've been to a wedding or some function. This is the south wall of the wall garden. So the formal gardens right now are in here. And my lights know that they're in here. I'm gonna make it plain. So this is on the south side, and it covers 3 acres. And people say, well, what is a children's garden? Well, there is no real definition of a children's garden. These are relatively new to the botanical garden world, but basically, and I'm looking out here and I can probably say what we're trying to do is create for young children what those of us of a certain age in here did when we were small. And that's play outside, play in the creek, play in the pond, roll down a hill. All of those things are being built in the garden. Now, up in the upper left is the part of the water play structure, water play area. You really can't tell it, but in the lower photograph there, that is the bottom of the hill. So on top is the top of the hill, on the photograph on the bottom is the bottom. There's a big level area up there with water jets and things, but then there's a natural looking stream. And we've had a company build the rocks there that look just like the rocks down on the old Saluda factory and down on the river. And then there's a pond where children will be able to go out in the pond and it's being done with tadpoles and frogs and all the other things that we used to play with when we were kids. So we're very excited about that. It's the education center in the children's garden on top. And the hardest thing to photograph is very frustrating for our graphics folks. So these 2 pictures on the bottom. We're building 5 tree houses, and each one is 2 stories tall, and they're built on the side of the hill. And they are amazing, and children are going to have a ball playing in those tree houses. So our bridge, hopefully, I don't know, we're not getting our bridge, but we're hoping it's going to take us about 9 to 10 months to build it once we get approval from the county. We've opened Grizzly Otter and entrance sea lion will be next spring. The children's garden, we're hitting a bad spot with it in that it's probably going to be completed right about the time when you would say to children you can't play in the water. So it's going to have this great water feature and people are going to come up and ooh and ah, but it's going to be probably too cool to go in until the spring. But trust me, there's plenty enough to do up there. So that's what we've got going on at the zoo. I I didn't show one stinking animal except for the 3 otters and the grizzly bear. Such is my life anymore. So I've got 5 minutes. I'll be glad, yes sir, to answer any questions.
What could keep the water moccasins out of the children?
There are no water moccasins over there. Copperheads, yes, water moccasins.
With all the construction, do you look for local builders and construction people, or is it mostly out of the city?
You will know this contractor. The contractor that's building the new entry seals, sea lion, and grizzly otter is Rogers Builders out of Charlotte, who built Palmetto Richland and Park Ridge. They're using a lot of local subs, and then the children's garden is being built by Tyler Construction and Columbia Area Construction Company.
Satch, big fan of the members. I think it's amazing what you've done and with the challenges that you alluded to. What do you attribute your success to?
A lot of support from the community. I think we learned, and I do say we, not me, we learned a long time ago that in spite of what some of our elected leaders think, people do want quality. They will respond to quality. They respect quality. And so everything that we've done, we try to do the very best we can do. I also think there are some practical reasons why the zoo has succeeded, and I mentioned those earlier. The fact that we are in the center of the state, that we're a 2-hour drive from practically 90+% of the population, that we are on I-77, people coming from the northeast going down to Florida. So they're at 95 as well. So there are a lot of practical reasons, and then I think there are some that just have to do with our approach to how we've done things over the years. Hope that makes sense.
I just got a question. Well, I was married in your zoo in 2009.
Yeah.
So appreciate it. Had a lot of beautiful photos, but
We do 60 weddings a year out there.
I was going to ask for weddings and certain like receptions like that we use the botanical gardens
Yes.
for. Do you ever try to see if that attracts some of your guests? Because I know at my wedding, I had people from out of state that were there just in the botanical gardens. It was after hours. Obviously, they couldn't visit the zoo. And they said they would maybe turn back to Columbia to see the rest of the zoo.
Yes.
So, like,
The short answer is yes, we do. The weddings stimulate a lot of attendance and in-park spending in the zoo and the botanical garden.
Animals. Is there some animal that you don't have, you'd like to have, or maybe you've only got one that you'd like to have more of, something like that?
I get asked that question a lot. And, about the only, I'm going to tell you a zoo term, charismatic megaburger. Think about that. Charismatic megaburger. So a charismatic megaburger, at the top of that would be gorillas, elephants, tigers, animals that you've known and are big. And, we've got them all. But there are certain species that we don't have, like orangutans. I'd love to have an orangutan exhibit one day. But I think you're going to see zoos change over the next 20 years. It's going to be a bit of a challenge. We no longer, and have not in a long time, imported animals from the wild anymore. All the animals at the zoo were born in captivity. We have to manage them very carefully in a scientific manner, using computer programs and genetics and things to make sure that we keep genetic diversity as best we can. So, we're very fortunate, and you will never see, and we're going to circle back around to an early statement. If you think one day, if you wait long enough, you're going to go out to Riverbanks Zoo and see all these wonderful antelope, you'll never see that. We don't have the room. We are just out of it. So we are concentrating on those animals that we can do the best job for in the space that we have. Thank you all very much.